Let us take another example of nesting if and else statements. So in this particular example, you have an if block which begins and ends right here, and the corresponding else block begins here and ends here. And this is a statement that is outside of both the if and the else block. Now the if block has another if block inside it, which starts here and ends here. It has a couple of statements. And the else block has a whole if and an else construct. The if construct begins here and ends here. The else construct begins here and ends here. Both the if and the else have two instructions each. So for this particular code snippet, what would be the statements executed when C1, C2 and C3 are given? So for example, if C1 is true, C2 is false, and C3 is false, which statements are executed? You can put a check mark beside each statement that is executed. Now since C1 is true, you enter the if block and you execute I1 and I2. C2 is evaluated and it came out to be false. So you skip the if block and you do not execute the else block because the else belongs to the outer if. Now if has run out of statements, so the next instruction that you would execute is I10. Now assume C1 came out to be false, C2 came out to be true, and C3 came out to be false. In this situation, which statements are executed? Since C1 was evaluated and it came out to be false, we skip the whole if block and we automatically execute the else block. We go into the else block and we encounter the first if statement where we have to evaluate C3. C3 was evaluated and it came out to be false. So you skip IA and IB and you automatically execute the else block. You come out of the else block and then the outer else also has run out of statements. So go outside and execute I10. In the third variation, assume C1 is false, C2 is true, and C3 is true. In this case, since C1 is false, you automatically go to the else block, evaluate C3 in the first if condition, which came out to be true, execute IA and IB. You do not execute the else because you have executed the if. Come out of the else block and execute I10. In the final variation, let's assume C1 came out to be true, C2 came out to be true, and C3 came out to be true as well. Since C1 is true, you execute I1 and I2, then you evaluate C2, which came out to be true again. You execute IX and IY, and you come out of the inner if, and there are no more statements in the outer if to execute. So you go outside and execute I10. The else block is automatically skipped. So this is how nesting works, and you should be able to figure out the order in which the statements are executed. So this is what I meant by saying instructions are not executed sequentially always, or in most cases.